Okay, looks like we have a full crowd. Good evening, my name is Renee Scalacci, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. This is our second community meeting for Advancing Alhambra, which for those of you who may not know or may not be familiar, this is the City of Alhambra's plan to cut down on cut-through traffic by focusing on key intersections along the I-10. Today's format is similar to what we did last meeting. Our chief project engineers, Bob and Pat, will make a presentation, and we will then open it up for questions and comments. Folks will be able to call in and ask questions via phone, or they'll be able to write questions via the chat box. I'll give instructions on how to access both of those in just a little while. A few quick notes: this meeting is being recorded, and we will be posting this later on our website. For those of you who don't know, the website is advancingalhambra.org, and that's one word. We want to emphasize how important your input has been thus far and will continue to be in this process. It's very critical. We have had some great questions at our last meeting. In fact, we've updated our FAQ section of the website based on the comments received and the questions asked, so you can please check it out if you haven't. And we look forward to a very productive discussion tonight. After the presentation, we will be taking verbal and written comments, as I mentioned earlier, and you can use the Q&A feature on your Zoom screen. We will also have a pop-up poll for you at the very end of our presentation, so be sure to stick around. Now I'm going to turn it over to Bob Bloom, who's with Kimley Horn, and Pat Gibson of Gibson Transportation Consulting. Bob, Pat.
Bob, do you want to start? Say hello. You're on mute, Bob. Still on mute.
Hello, everyone. We are excited to be here tonight, and we'll look forward to your comments. Pat?
All right. Let's go to the first slide. Okay, next one. There we are. Do we want to go to slideshow and get a bigger picture? Or is this as big as? All right, so let me, while we're adjusting here, let me tell you what we're going to try and accomplish tonight. We're going to do a quick review of what we did last, well, a month ago. Answer some of the questions that you asked, then show you some graphics that that hopefully will answer those. And then most of the time tonight, we're going to spend on how do we design a freeway interchange? What are the choices? And if we apply those choices to the Alhambra locations, what do they look like? Then we're going to chat a little bit with each other here on what we saw, and let you continue to ask some questions. So let's go to the next slide. So we told you a month ago that this was a long process, and we spent the first meeting looking at existing conditions, existing operational problems, and we promised tonight we would bring back some ideas on how to fix, how to deal with the traffic at a couple locations. So tonight we're going to look at Interstate 10 between 710 and Fremont, and we're going to look at some choices for Fremont itself. So we're also going to ask you what you think of the 6 different choices we have for Fremont to help us decide which ones we should proceed with. Next slide. Vaughn, next slide. There we are. So last time you rightly asked, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What are the goals of this study? Well, first and foremost, we want to reduce the amount of cut-through traffic on the city of Alhambra streets. And I'm going to show you where that cut-through traffic is coming from and how much of it there really is. Then as we focus in on the interchanges along I-10 itself, we want to look at what can we do to improve the traffic safety and improve the flow through those interchanges. And when we do that, we want to do it such that we can support future bicycle, pedestrian, and transit improvements in the south side of Alhambra. So next slide. Let's look at where the traffic coming through Alhambra is coming from. So if we look at the year 2040 numbers, the computer models project that we're going to have over 58,000 cars a day that want to use the stub if we left everything alone and didn't do anything. And this is a model output called a select link analysis. We can ask the model to tell us where traffic on every different street piece, every street segment in the city, where's that traffic coming from and where is it going to? So this is really one of the keys to figure out how do we get traffic off Alhambra streets. First of all, we have to know where they're coming from. So next, as traffic approaches the stub, the circled section here. Next slide, Vaughn. Here we are. So most of the traffic on the stub is really coming north-south on I-710. There's not too much of it headed for downtown on the 10 itself. Next slide. So out of that 58,000 cars, 22% of those trips, 22% have a destination within the city of Alhambra. They either work in Alhambra or they live in Alhambra. So 22% of the people are Alhambra trips. Next slide. The largest majority are traveling north through the entire city of Alhambra. 38% are headed to South Pass, to Pasadena, to 210, up to La Cañada, up to 210. So even though we don't have a 710 extension, there's still a bunch of people that want to go north-south through this corridor. Next slide. The focus of most of the work we're going to be doing tonight are those trips that are driving all the way through Alhambra to the eastern suburbs. So 25% of the traffic that's on the stub today is cutting all the way through Alhambra, doesn't care that Alhambra is there, is using Alhambra streets to get to points east. Now, if you look at that 25% plus some of the 12% that's driving through maybe more Alhambra streets than they need to get home, you're looking at between 15 and 20,000 trips a day that are driving on Alhambra streets. And we'd like to get at least 15,000 of those off Alhambra streets by keeping them on the I-10 freeway. Next slide. The last element of this is 14% are on the stub that come to and from the west. So that's the next slide, I think, shows the 100%. That's where all the traffic is going to and from. So this is really an important slide for all of us to understand. Because I-10 is congested, because some of our interchanges back up and take capacity away from I-10, that traffic chooses not to use I-10, but instead to use city streets. So next slide. So we've got a computer model, yada, yada, big deal, that looks at the whole region and looks at where traffic is going. So we think we've got a really good picture of what the patterns look like. Next slide. We talked last time about bicycles and pedestrians and what was the city doing about those. And what we learned was, in terms of a citywide bicycle plan, the city is actively seeking funding to do a study to put together a bike plan for the entire city. We continue to make pedestrian improvements throughout the city. And what this study is doing is focusing on bikes and peds through the 4 interchanges that we're going to be looking at. We want to make sure that we give bicycles and pedestrians the ability to get through those new interchange designs safely. Next slide. We have a fair amount of transit in the city of Alhambra, and what we want to do is, again, make sure Fremont, Atlantic, and Garfield, make sure that those improvements that we do have the ability to help transit get across I-10 and serve the north-south corridors in the city. Next slide. We talked a little bit last time about how the money that was dedicated to the tunnel study, how that money is going to be spent by the corridor cities, since Metro and Caltrans have decided that there won't be an extension of 710. So the city of Los Angeles, shown here on the yellow lines, are doing a number of corridor studies. How do they move traffic on those corridors? And the red corridors here show the city of Alhambra and the corridor studies that Alhambra is undertaking. Next slide. And we have a number of grants that we're using to improve traffic on these north-south and on the Valley Boulevard corridor. Next. We were asked the question, how many cars are on the streets today and how many are supposed to be there in 2040? So I know that this is a difficult slide to read, but it will be on the website. So you can take a look at this and look between the 2 graphs and see where traffic is projected to grow and how much over that 20-year period between 2020 and 2040. Next slide. This is, again, kind of an interesting one. When we looked at what the signage, what the regional signage on the entire length of 710 was telling motorists, it was telling them that you just keep driving on 710 north and you'll get to Pasadena. Well, we all know that you don't get to Pasadena until or unless you cut through a lot of Alhambra streets. So we need to work with Caltrans to figure out how do we want to change that, since 710 is not really a route to Pasadena anymore. Next slide. So as Renee said, there's a whole list of frequently asked questions and answers. There are volumes from 2021 and 2040. The presentation from a month ago and tonight's presentation and survey results and a lot of history on this project are all on the website, advancingalhambra.org. So if you want to go back and refresh your memory on anything that we talked about, it is all on the website. Next slide. So when we focus in on the travel volumes that are moving on our streets, we really end up focusing in on some critical points. Next slide. The early testing that we've done have said Fremont, the Fremont Interchange, and the weave between 710 and I-10, those two are so critical. They cause so much congestion on the I-10 freeway that they encourage people to jump off the freeway and cut through Alhambra. So looking at those two areas, looking at potentially changing the 710 stub area from a freeway to an arterial street, and looking at how we might upgrade and reduce congestion at Atlantic and Garfield, these are the locations that we think are going to have the most effect on reducing cut-through traffic on Alhambra streets. So the next slide just shows a location of the 4 areas we're focusing on as part of this study. So that's kind of a summary of where we've been, a summary of some of the questions and answers from the last meeting. Let's go to the next slide and let's start talking about what does that mean going forward. Normally when we traffic engineers try and figure out how to design a freeway and how to design an interchange, we have the choice of putting the freeway up in the air or in a depressed trench or at grade. In this case, the freeway is already there. So the freeway is at grade. And as we look at interchange improvements, we have to take the local street over the top, as shown on the left slide, or we have to take the local street under the freeway, as you see on the right. So those are our choices. And as we look at how do we improve the freeway interchanges along Interstate 10, our choice is to really go over or under the freeway that's there. So let's go to the next slide. There are actually 5 different basic interchange types. Here's the first 4, and I'm going to show you another one on the next slide. But here, the interchange design that most of us are familiar with is down in the bottom right corner. It's a diamond interchange. And it's used mostly in low volume situations. The ramps on the north side of the overpass and on the south side of the overpass, in this case, are usually signalized. And the limitations of this design are that those 2 signals are located very close to each other. there's a lot of left turns trying to get on or off the freeway. So that's an interchange design that does not have a lot of capacity. It becomes congested pretty quickly. So a long time ago in the 1960s, when Interstate 10 was built, the interchange design right above that, the full cloverleaf, was used, and that's what you'll see at Garfield and at Atlantic. And that interchange design worked great at Garfield and Atlantic for a long time, until traffic volumes got so high that those little areas between the loops ended up becoming very congested. So Caltrans went to interchange design number 3, a partial cloverleaf that allowed them to take the left turns off the city street to use 2 cloverleafs and get traffic on and off the freeway easier. And we can actually handle higher volumes on number 3 than we can on number 2. Number 1 is a relatively new design called a single point urban interchange. And if you compare 1 and 4 on this drawing, you'll see that I've taken the 2 traffic signals that are on the city street, and I've combined them into 1 in the middle of that intersection, middle of the interchange, thus the term single point. And those allow me to handle all of the left turns much more efficiently. I don't get any interchange lock. So those are the 4 basic configurations. The next slide shows another new concept called a diverging diamond. And this one allows me to move traffic around so that cars can get onto and off the freeway without making a left turn or a right turn that is opposed by any traffic. So it's very efficient. It moves traffic smoothly. It has really high capacity, but as you can see, one of its advantages is that it takes up a pretty big footprint. So those are kind of our basic choices. Now, what happens when we try and start applying those to our Alhambra locations? So let's talk about the 710 and the 10 interchange first with the next slide. Let's go on one more. Here we are. So this is the congestion. The red lines show you the afternoon peak hour congestion on the freeway. And you can see the area between Fremont on the top right and 710 in the middle. That eastbound direction is all red. And it's really all red for 2 reasons. One, the Fremont ramps actually back up onto the freeway and take a lane away. But even more importantly than that, the cars coming north on 710 that want to get onto eastbound 10, they have to merge, excuse me, they have to weave with all of the traffic that's trying to move over to get off on Fremont. So the next slide shows you up on top, you'll see that X between the blue and the red arrows. That's called a weave. Those 2 flows of traffic have to weave into one another and then cross each other. And that weave takes much more time than just driving straight. So that weave backs up traffic. And as you saw from where does traffic go, most of the traffic on the stub is coming from the south on 710. If that backs up, all of those cars on 710 that wanted to go east say, Yeah, I'm not doing that. I'll just keep going on the stub and cut through Alhambra. So trying to solve that weave and the congestion caused by that weave is really critical for us to get traffic through traffic off Alhambra streets. So the way we do that is what's called a braided ramp. Next slide. So here's the flow of traffic. In the morning, I've got 1,060 trips that want to get off the northbound 710 and onto the eastbound 10. In the afternoon, it's 1,150 trips. Those trips are opposed by the 630 or the 342 trips on 10 that want to get to Fremont. So right there in the middle of that section, I have 15 to almost 1,800 trips trying to weave across each other. You can see I've got more in that lane than I have in the other 3 lanes on the freeway. That's where my congestion is coming from. Next. So I solve that by not having those cars cross each other. I solve that by braiding the ramp. I take one ramp over the top, one ramp underneath. Those cars can get on and off those freeways without ever having to cross each other. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at between 710 and Fremont on 10. And this is what it would look like. Next slide. Oh, let's do one more. Here we are. So right now on the top is the existing condition. We have freeway lanes, a shoulder, a sound wall, and then a frontage road, Ramona Road, which is one lane in each direction and parking against the homes. In order to add that braided ramp, we would actually add one more lane onto the freeway, narrow those lanes down a bit. We'd push the sound wall over about 4 feet closer to the homes and still allow parking and travel along Ramona Road. So we don't change the right of way. We do change the width of Ramona Road, and we do that so that there's still enough room for the fire department to travel on that road and still have enough room to fight a fire in any of the homes along there. So our idea is to do a braided ramp to eliminate that congestion, to allow traffic to stay on I-10 longer. Next slide. So let's look at Fremont itself. We have 6 ideas on how to adjust or how to improve the Fremont interchange. So we tried to apply those different interchange configurations we showed you to the Fremont interchange. So most of our discussion tonight is going to be on that. Here's the existing condition. Fremont goes under the freeway, has a signal at both ends at Hellman and down south where we turn to continue going south. So this is the existing condition. Next slide. And here's what it looks like under the freeway. The freeway is up on top, really at grade level, but underneath we have a sidewalk on both sides. We have 2 lanes in each direction, and we have a median going down the middle, which holds up the column that's holding up the freeway. So that's what it looks like on the left in an aerial photo, on the right in a cross section of what the underpass actually looks like. Next slide. So if we say, all right, let's forget the underpass, let's put a new roadway, let's straighten out Fremont, put it over the top, and let's put in a single point urban interchange. So this is what it would look like. The purple shading on parcels is where we would have to buy land to do this. The green is where we would probably change parking or change the frontage roads. We wouldn't buy any land. We would just change the operation of the street at that point. So this configuration, you can see it's a long overpass. That red line along Fremont is the total length of the changes we would have to make. On the left-hand side of your drawing, we've showed you in a range of minimum to maximum the number of parcels that we would impact. This one impacts the most of any of the 6 alternatives we're looking at. We've showed you the cost. This one costs the most of any that we're looking at. In terms of performance, being traffic engineers, we use red, yellow, and green. This one, we'd like to be able to say we could get it all the way to green, but it's got some other ramifications. So it improves the situation, but it doesn't bring it all the way to green. If I look at the cost in the right of way and the fact that I'm only average performance, the cost benefit of this particular improvement is not very good. It gets a pretty low score in terms of cost benefit. So we said, look, the biggest impact here is the right of way, the impact on land parcels. What if we tried to minimize that, but still kept a single point urban interchange? The next slide shows you what would happen if we tried to bend that to follow Fremont a little more closely. Still very expensive, still kind of has a fair number of right-of-way impacts. We avoid the school, but there are other right-of-way impacts. So a little better cost benefit, but not so great, frankly. So the next slide says, what if we did that diverging diamond over the top of the freeway? Well, we reduce the right-of-way impacts a bit, but construction is still expensive because I'm still going over that freeway. I get really good traffic performance out of this one. So my cost benefit is kind of middle of the road. Next slide. If I went to a more straightforward partial cloverleaf on a new overcrossing, I reduce the number of parcels that I affect. I still spend a fair amount of money because I'm building a new road over the top of the freeway. I get pretty good traffic performance, and I get kind of average overall cost benefit. Next slide. So what if I say, let's forget about going over the top. Let's use the existing underpass. Can I make any improvements to the interchange by using the existing underpass? And here's a situation where I can lengthen the on-ramps and the off-ramps so I have much less effect on the freeway operations. For the eastbound and northbound loop ramp, I can re-stripe underneath the freeway so I get a lane that allows me to make that loop movement more smoothly. And I can get onto the southbound freeway with a ramp. Unfortunately, that new ramp has an impact on a purple area there, which is residential, which we don't really like to mess with. So this one affects a lot fewer parcels, has pretty good performance from a traffic standpoint, it's pretty good in terms of construction cost because I'm using the underpass, and it has a positive cost benefit ratio. The last one is a variation of this. So next slide. The biggest difference here is I've eliminated that southbound to westbound on-ramp that resulted in a couple of apartment buildings being purchased. And instead, I come southbound turn left to get onto the freeway. So in this case, it's the least amount of land that I affect. It's the least construction cost, still pretty good traffic performance, and the best of the cost benefit ratios. So the last slide here before we break up a little bit. Here's the summary of all 6 of those slides. You can see that as we go from A to F, and I'm sorry that F and E should be reversed here. It should be A, B, C, D, E, and F. We continue to minimize the number of parcels that are impacted. We continue to minimize the cost, and our traffic performance improves, and our cost benefit ratio improves as we go from A through F. So the last slide I have before we break for questions, as we looked at this and looked at the evaluation, our goal is, and we talked about this last time, our goal is to get down to 2 or 3 alternatives that look like they make sense to keep studying. So when we look at this, we think the 4 alternatives that perform the best are alternates C or D if we want to do an overhead choice, and E or F if we want to use the existing underpass. So we're going to ask you in a few minutes what your thoughts are or what your choices are out of those 6. But before we do that, we want to spend a half hour or so doing questions and going back and seeing if we can clarify anything for you. We've got a bunch of people that have emailed in questions and a bunch of people with their hands raised. So I'm going to turn it over to Renee, who's going to master of ceremonies this part, and then we'll come back and get some more of your input. Renee?
Great, thank you, Pat. Okay, so as I said, we're going to open it up for questions and comments. First, if you would like to write a question, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Just go ahead and click on the Q&A button and you can submit your written comment that way. If you would prefer to have a verbal comment, please raise your hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. When it's your turn to speak, we will call your name and turn your microphone on. You'll be muted until we turn it on. That way it allows everyone a chance to speak. You will then be, as I said, be unmuted and you will be able to speak. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes, and we'll have a clock running on the screen to help us keep track of time. And in the event that you go over, please pardon us in advance. We will have to let you kindly know that your time is exhausted. Also, for folks who are calling in this evening, you need to press *9 to raise your hand. When it's your turn to speak, you'll read out loud the last 4 digits of your phone number. So we will read your last 4 digits of your phone number and we will unmute you. Excuse me, you will unmute yourself. So let's back up. We'll read your 4 digits of your phone number. And when you hear your number is called, you will go ahead and you'll unmute yourself by dialing *6, and then you'll be able to speak. And also for any callers or folks that we mispronounce your name, I apologize in advance, and please let us know the correct pronunciation of your name. So let's get started. We have a couple hands. We're going to start with the first caller, Edwin Sun. Please take off his mute button.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes, I am very disappointed in the lack of imagination that we just witnessed. Let me summarize what we have seen. You'd like the San Gabriel Valley community to give you more space in our communities that was dedicated to homes and businesses for diverting diamond on and off ramps. You want more space to widen the I-10. You want more money for a bridge to braid the interchange and reduce lane weaving. You mentioned that the reason for pursuing these improvements is because of congestion on the I-10. What I have not seen is you guys asking the question of whether or not inducing mode change would be a better way to mitigate traffic along the I-10 than continuing this path of doing auto-centric infrastructure. It's just very disappointing. It really just lacks imagination. It is so, forgive me, but such an indictment of the traffic engineering profession that you guys continually focus on these types of solutions that are not the fix for traffic in Los Angeles and the San Gabriel Valley is not an engineering solution. It is a political solution. The only thing that can fix traffic is us deciding to make some mode changes and get people out of their cars. You are frankly just not going to be able to do this. And I think it's very revealing that your slides, instead of using quantifiable metrics for telling us what the estimated traffic impact of each improvement would be in terms of vehicle throughput on the I-10 or what vehicle speeds would be during rush hour, you instead tell us that this one's red, this one's yellow, this one's green. So you are not giving us community members any type of objective measurements for us to be able to gauge your performance, which I just expect will be very poor. So I am very disappointed. I hope that you will change drastically what you are proposing.
Thank you for your comments, Edwin. Our next caller, Jay Show. Jay, can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you for attending again. I remember you from our last meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm here to provide input for more multimodal transit in green space. I'm personally a biker. I frequently take the bus, and I also frequently go to the park to relax. But honestly, I mean, for me as a Alhambra resident, I don't really see those resources invested to allow for more bicyclists, bus riders, and park goers. I really just see like a lot of the resources invested in moving cars back and forth. It looks like the conversation is only about moving cars just on the ferry ramps. And from my understanding of Alhambra, the project is supposed to be like a holistic view of improving transit. But like I said before, it just looks like all the conversation is just about transportation on cars. And I'd love to have more resources and time being put onto multimodal transit. I mean, I would love to see if we can reimagine Alhambra where the city's more walkable for our parents and students, especially the ones that are around Fremont Elementary, walking to school, so that they don't have to fear that a speeding vehicle might crash into them, whom a lot of parents have expressed those concerns to me. I'd love to see in Alhambra where we can like walk to some of our local restaurants, our grocery stores, or we can bike to the nearest park below us, or bike to the nearest park stop, so that I can wait like 10, 15 minutes to get up to the bus and then manage to get to downtown LA. I mean, I will be interested in being able to, at some point, forgoing my vehicle to go to work, to grocery shop, or even go to the park. I just don't really see that reliable infrastructure that will allow me to do that. I mean, I could avoid contributing to traffic on the freeway or local streets if I had better means to other transportation methods. And I feel like I'm not the only one who feels that way. 80% of millennials said that access to public transportation is very important to them. The new next gen bus study also had similar findings. Much of the generation wants to walk, bike, or bus, and we just don't provide that opportunity for them. So I'd love to have more of the conversation around those topics as well.
Okay, we're going to take a couple questions that have been submitted in writing. Pat and Bob, I'm going to take two questions here and you guys feel free to answer them. The first question, would these interchange improvements be funded with Measure R highway funds? And the second question goes to the caller Edwin's point earlier. Has the engineer team explored inducing mode choice change rather than auto-centric infrastructure for mitigating traffic?
So Bob, let me start and then you can take the funding question. We talked about this a little bit at the first meeting. You have to understand the different functions of the plans that we're trying to look at. Our goal, our task was to look at improving these 4 locations. I don't think there's anybody that would argue or anybody that would not like to see a mode shift. I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't like to see bicycle planning on a citywide basis. The transit planning that needs to be done to encourage mode shift is really done at a regional basis, not even at a citywide basis. So the goals that we're all talking about to get people out of our cars and into a different mode, those are all laudable goals. But what we're trying to do is give ourselves a chance to make those choices, make those improvements by getting some of this cut through traffic off our streets. When you say we'd like our kids to be able to walk to school, well, I'm not letting my kid walk to school until after those cars are off my streets. So we don't disagree with anything we've heard in those first 2 or 3 comments. We're just saying there are steps that we have to take along the way to get us there. Bob?
So to answer the question on the Measure R funding, the city was able to secure funds when the tunnel was abandoned by Metro and Caltrans more recently. And now those funds are being applied and the city was able to secure those to start making some of these improvements to help benefit the residents of Alhambra.
Okay, we're going to take 2 more written questions and then we'll go back to the live folks that have called in. So the next 2 questions are, how accurate are project traffic volumes? I heard that traffic projections tend not to be very accurate. And the second question to that is, where are pedestrian improvements being constantly implemented? Bob and Pat?
So in terms of traffic projections and traffic models, all of our existing traffic levels are actually based on counts of vehicles moving along a particular street. So those are not estimates, those are actual traffic flows. And what we've done is take 50, 70 years of history looking at land use changes and looking at traffic flow changes. And we use that history to help us build a model to predict what's going to happen in the future. Are they perfect? No, but I'm not trying to use those to figure out how many seconds the green light is on. I'm using those to try and figure out what the patterns are and what the traffic flow is going to look like. So it doesn't have to be precise to the 4th decimal point. They are certainly close enough to help us figure out where traffic is moving and what the ramifications are of some of those changes. To the extent I can get 10%, 20%, 30% of those cars off the street by getting people into bikes or buses or light rail, that would be great. And we're also trying to factor that into our models. Renee, what was the second part of the question?
Okay, and the second question, Pat, was where are pedestrian improvements being constantly implemented?
Well, I think Martin might be able to help me with that one. The city is always looking at improving sidewalks and fixing sidewalks and handicap ramps and looking at places where trees are picking up your sidewalks. So I think from a city standpoint, maintaining and improving the sidewalk system is a continuously ongoing operation.
Okay, we're going to take a call now. The next caller is Sal DiStefano. Sal, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yeah. So I just want to reiterate some of the comments that were made previously and just use a intuitive common sense thing. If you make interchanges a higher capacity, more efficient, all that's going to do is put more traffic on the streets. I mean, you know, why would you want to get off at Valley, for example, if you could go to Atlantic and go through Alhambra streets at Atlantic? So I'm not convinced that making higher efficiency, higher capacity interchanges is going to help the cars that are going through Alhambra now. And again, you're only trying to mitigate, I guess you said 25%, because you know the people are going to Pasadena north-south. Whatever the number was, they're still going to have to go north-south on Fremont or whatever closest to their destination is. So that 25% that your model is predicting is what you're trying to mitigate. And so I'm not real comfortable with that. The other thing is that we keep saying, well, let's make these big changes now and we'll do mode changes, 20 years later or something like that. Well, we know that's not going to happen. If at all, we will make these bigger, more efficient interchanges, and that'll be it. Yeah, I'm finished for now.
Thank you, Sal. Our next speaker is Melissa Mickelson.
Hi, I'm an Alhambra resident. You can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, great. So I was just taking notes as other people were talking. I'm not prepared at all to vote on one of these 6 options because they don't seem like real options to me. These seem like false options. If the weave is a problem, why can't you just fix that? I don't know why we have to go through everything, because in my experience, the north side of the 10 freeway never experienced traffic. And I am one of those people that exits. I need to get to Fremont, but I go to the 710 instead. And then I end up getting stuck in Valley traffic. So if the weave is that problem, then just fix that. I've asked for data at the other meeting a couple weeks ago, and here we're just getting, again, pretty colors, green and red, and the pictures that you show don't tell us when those times are. Is that commuting time? It feels like you're creating a problem, or you're presenting some kind of problem to satisfy the need for you guys to spend money, a big pot of money. I think if Gibson traffic engineers aren't prepared to or specialized in making in these multi-mode change options and presenting those to us, then the city should get more bids. There's more than one way to skin a cat. I'm also concerned about the 710 stub that needs to be looked at altogether with the Fremont, and it just seemed like you focused on the Fremont exchange. Finally, I agree. I don't see any pedestrian improvements in Alhambra. I think that needs to be qualified with data as well, that comment. And yeah, if you're planning to factor bikes into this modes and these changes, please show us that in your data. I don't see that anywhere either. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. The next question that we received was, how safe are diverting diamonds for pedestrians and bicyclists?
I think I can address that. The diverging diamond interchange actually has 2 traffic signals at it. So all the pedestrian flows are protected by a walk, don't walk signal. All are protected by a crosswalk. So the diverging diamond is actually a very friendly and safe design for pedestrians.
Our next written question, let's see here, hold on one second. Are the traffic modes for the Fremont ramp taking into account the 60% of the 710 stub?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but the volumes that we're using getting on and off the Fremont interchange assume all of the traffic flow along 710 and assume all of the flow along I-10. So I don't know what the 60% refers to, but all of the traffic that we're looking at flowing through the whole system is being considered.
How long would it take to complete the project?
Bob?
Yeah, so as Pat has talked about, the next step of this is after we get your input is we start talking to Caltrans about these potential solutions and start working with them to get their input. They have quite a rigorous process that we need to get through. And I think most of you witnessed that as you watched the studies that have been completed over the years. So after we get through this initial narrowing down of alternatives, we move into the environmental process and then to final design and construction. So it could be as early as 6 years out for construction.
We'll take a live caller. Henry Avils, are you there, Henry? You gotta ask me. There
Do you
you
hear
go.
me?
Yeah,
You
can you
hear
hear
me?
us? Yep, we got you.
You know, I got the concept of the Fremont exits, but you know, you lost me on the whole weave and at the 710 stub. You know, I understand that concept of the cars crossing each other, but what type of bridging are you gonna do there? I didn't get it. You know, you went too fast. I think we need to meet in person at some point, and then you know you can put up the screen, and if somebody has a question, you know they can raise their hand and ask you to explain it a little bit more in depth, because this is I'm not getting it. And I want to get it, but I just am not getting it.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'd all like to be live. We all like to be talking to each other and showing you drawings. We're limited to this not for now, but hopefully by the fall we can get in a big room and look at drawings and point at the wall and do lots of things like we used to do. So I feel your pain.
So Mr. Gibson, so can we like, actually we can go back and look at it, right? I mean, you know, on advancingalhambra.org, right?
Yes.
And then, can we submit a question through that platform? Another
Yes,
question?
you can. Yes.
Okay, because I'm not getting it, and
Okay.
I want to get it.
All right. Well, take a look at it, submit a question, and we'll figure out how to work through so you understand what we're talking about.
Okay.
And Henry, as Pat mentioned, we're going to be having more public meeting. So hopefully we'll be live and we'll have an opportunity to meet in person and answer questions and go through this more thoroughly. And the website has a lot of information, advancingalhambra.org. Thank you for calling in. Our next
Okay.
caller is Connie Ho.
Good evening, everybody. I was at the first meeting and I have to say that I am so frustrated that we're just being shown the same apples, green apples, red apples, yellow apples. These interchanges are not going to solve our traffic problems. And I want to know how the, once in a lifetime amount of money coming from the 710 project is going to be wisely spent for the next 100 years, because it really seems like this is out of date information. It seems like Urban Planning 101 will tell you that if you build better roads, faster roads, then the cars will just move better and faster. Is your traffic study accounting for multimodal transit? And where are we going to put the new bus lines, existing bus lines? How are we going to improve the roads so that cyclists and pedestrians are actually safe? I need to hear this information, and I'm incredibly frustrated that you're wasting our time with this again. With all due respect, Pat, Mr. Gibson, I think that changing the interchanges will not make our city better. Our cars will just duplicate, and it's frustrating. I see you drawing plans to tear up my neighborhood. I live off the Fremont stub, the 710 stub. I live near the ramp. You are moving the walls. You're asking people to pick up and move just so we can build a road that goes faster, that hurts our elders, hurts the children, and pushes more cars through a school. I don't want to hear any more about these interchanges. We need multimodal transit. Thank you.
Can we extend the 710 to Mission or Huntington with an overpass?
So this has been a popular question. We have looked at it. There's no appetite at all to extend the roadway north to Huntington. There's just too much private property land use in the way. Caltrans is already committed that they would not do that extension. We did look at extending it to Mission, and what happens is we push all of that traffic, that 58,000 cars, instead of 85% of it going on to Valley, 85% of it goes up and goes on to Mission. And people have said, well, yeah, but that really improves the intersection of Fremont and Valley. Yeah, it does, but it transfers that to the intersection of Mission and Fremont. So we haven't really accomplished anything with that. And Mission itself doesn't have the capacity or the intent of wanting to serve that amount of through traffic. So we really didn't get the kind of improvement by doing the Mission extension that people had hoped for.
Okay, the next written question we received: is there a way to fix the weave problem, but also use the existing ramp configuration?
Bob, you did most of the work on the weave. What do you, I think the answer is no, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, anything's possible, but we're seeing that, with the Fremont ramps and that stop sign and some of the limited operational opportunities at Fremont, that if you fix the weave, that's part of the solution, but it is still going to back up onto the freeway, and it's not going to help that relief of the traffic trying to get off at Fremont, off and on. Those short ramps are really a problem safety wise, and we're just trying to help improve that with the braided ramp, and that starts to be the things that start to pull some of the traffic off of the 710 stub. And that's the goal that we're trying to do with that. So we can look at that, but I think we're going to find a resistance with Caltrans when we start looking at not improving those very deficient ramps.
Thank you, Bob. Our next written question. Has the design team considered eliminating an off-ramp at some locations and just making it an on-ramp to reduce cut-through traffic and eliminate a difficult, dangerous weave? This could be done at a fraction of the cost of the alternatives proposed and would make it harder for the 75% of traffic that is cutting through town to do so.
Caltrans has a philosophical problem with an on-ramp and not having an off-ramp, or an off-ramp and not having an on-ramp. They like to keep their on and offs balanced so that people can figure out how to use the roadway system and freeway system. I think in very unique situations, we might be able to look at something like that. So if you have an idea of what ramp makes some sense to eliminate, let us know and we can take a look at it.
Our next written comment. I found that this presentation is very technical. I'm really worried that folks who are not within transportation will be able to follow.
Well, we've tried to make it as untechnical as possible, and we've been criticized for not using numbers and calculations. So we're trying to find that happy balance that lets people understand what we're talking about, but still give you enough information to know why we came up with the conclusions we did. So we'll keep trying.
Okay. The next question. This is a long question, so I'll read it slowly. We got a detailed account of the number of cars being affected by the 710 and 10 freeway interchange. However, when you went into talking about the Fremont interchange, there was absolutely no mention of the number of cars that drive through the interchange. What are the numbers for traffic in the area? I would like to know how many cars go to the 10 freeway using the on-ramp and how many cars that use the intersection to go north on Fremont. Why aren't these numbers included? It was a big one, Pat. I'm happy to go back and piece it out.
No, I think what we are trying to do with this presentation is give you concepts and not bother you with a bunch of capacity calculations that don't mean much to most people anyway. So, I mean, we're happy to show you the volumes on each of these ramps. We can put it on the website and let you look at it and study it. But there's 6 different alternatives here. If I showed you morning and afternoon volumes for 6 alternatives for 8 ramps in each alternative, it's a lot of numbers. And what we're trying to look at now is concepts and what makes sense. And the thing that affects us most is physically, how big, how much room, how much land do some of these alternatives take up? And frankly, that's enough in many cases to just say, yeah, well, that alternative doesn't make any sense. So rather than study it to death, we can look at it and say, boy, that that alternative that goes over the top and does this and does that, it just is too impactful. Let's not consider that one anymore. So again, as we refine these alternatives, as we narrow it down, then we'll get into the numbers and the kinds of details that that some of you are asking for. But right now, there's too many concepts, too many alternatives to worry about the number of left turns at a particular ramp in the year 2040.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Our next written question: what studies are you referencing that show diversion diamonds are actually safe? Every study I've seen shows that they are fatal to pedestrians and cyclists.
Well, I don't know that I read that study, but the numbers that I've seen, and we'll try and find some references for you, suggest that the traffic signal control at those are a positive safety tool for pedestrians.
Our next written comment question: the survey asks which interchange is most in need of improvement. I think this depends on which improves the whole system the most. I suspect improving Fremont will help Garfield. Is there data to confirm or deny that?
Yeah, we're trying to look at all 4 of these locations. And as we tried to indicate tonight, Fremont and the weave that occurs leading up to Fremont, those are the 2 most critical pieces of congestion, the cause of congestion. If I solve those 2, then I am able to make both Atlantic and Garfield work a little better, but we're also looking at how those might be improved. So all 4 of them are working together as a system. And I don't think there's any one location that we can fix that one location and then say, oh, well, all of the rest of them will take care of themselves. So we are looking at that whole corridor, all 4 of those locations, to try and figure out which set of improvements work best together.
Thank you. Okay, we have a hand up from AP Medina.
Hi, everybody. First, I would like to just straight out say I don't like any of the proposals. I've been a resident of Alhambra. I've been a resident of Alhambra for a little bit over 20 years. I've lived in the Alhambra Park neighborhood, Emery Park neighborhood, and now I'm in the Granada Park neighborhood. I'm very concerned that these interchange improvements are going to affect, Fremont Elementary School. It's going to bring more speeding traffic to the intersection of Fremont and Hellman. I noticed in the slides that it also creates dead ends for many of the residential streets. I feel like it's going to negatively impact the circulation in our neighborhood here in Granada Park. I also saw that you guys are proposing to widen freeways. Honestly, I don't support any more air pollution than we already receive here where I live. I mean, I can't even open my window because there's lots of grit that comes in. I'm constantly cleaning. There was also some proposals about constructing an overhead bridge. And so I feel like I'm already burdened by the noise that we hear from cars, like their mufflers, motorcycles, music blaring, any proposal to build a bridge, I do not support. And that would also bring more air pollution to my home. So I was part of the first meeting. I still have the same questions. I still don't understand why we as the city of Alhambra, why are we paying for improvements to a Caltrans facility? Like I mentioned in the first meeting, these proposals, they're not going to make any difference to the congestion that already exists on Fremont and Mission. So I guess in conclusion, what I'm hearing from my neighbors is we're not supportive of these proposals. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we are going to, before we wrap up tonight, we want to get your opinion about the 6 interchange design options that Pat had laid out this evening. And we're gonna put up a quick poll and get your input in this. It'll be very helpful for the city and also for Caltrans to determine which of these concepts make sense and keep working on, in which we should not, in which would be the most important for residents and which we should not further any more sources studying. We'll run through these 6 concepts again, refresh your memory because you've heard a lot of information before you tonight, and then we'll get your opinion one by one as we go. Van, I don't see the slides. Could you pull those up?
There we go. Can we go to the next slide?
To the polling slide? Seems we might be having a little technical difficulty. Let's see here.
There we go.
There we go. Now it's starting to move.
Keep going.
I think it's down at slide 46, Van.
No, this will work.
Okay. You want to go ahead, Pat?
Yeah, this is fine.
Okay.
So
Apologize.
we're looking here at the single point urban interchange, the one that goes up in the air and through the school. So this is the one that had the greatest impact and the least cost benefit ratio. So unfortunately, the poll question is right on top of the interchange design. So maybe we can look at the next one before we put the poll question up. So
There we go.
all right, so not so much support for the first one. Now the second one, and Van, do we, can we move the polling box to the side? Or this is where it is? All right, so this is the spooey that goes along the roadway itself, doesn't have so much impact on land uses, but still is an expensive alternative.
If you're viewing this at home, maybe try moving the polling box. Mine just moved by dragging it to the side with your arrow. It worked for me.
All right, do we want to go to letter C, which was the diverging diamond? So oh, there you go. So if you are looking at a screen, you can put your cursor on the pole and move the pole right over Renee's head. And then you can see the alternative we're looking at. So this is a diverging diamond that goes over the freeway.
To advance the slide.
Oh, yeah. Van, can we go to the next slide, number 39? Van, can we advance the slide?
Are you not seeing 39?
No, we're seeing 38. At least I am.
I see 38.
There we are.
There we go.
All right, so this is the diverging diamond over the top of the freeway. I think most of you have voted. Oh, there's still some more. All right. Okay, let's go to slide number 40. All right, this is the partial clover leaf. We should be on, there we go, poll number 4. This is the partial clover leaf. Doesn't affect the school, but it still is over the top of over the freeway. So this is a new overpass. All right, let's go to 41. So 41 is the using the underground, the existing underground, changing the ramps and putting a new ramp southbound onto the freeway. Okay, and then we'll go to the last one. Okay, this is the same, sort of the same, but we've eliminated the ramp that affected the residential. So this is the least expensive and the least impactful in terms of right-of-way or parcels. Okay, I think we have our votes. So Renee, you want to wrap it up?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for their time this evening and joining us and providing comments and asking questions. And if you didn't get a chance to speak or you wanted more information, you can always email our team at info@advancingalhambra.org, info@advancingalhambra.org, or you could go to the website at advancingalhambra.org, and you can push the tab, Get Connected, and there you can submit any questions or comments, and we're happy to get back to you. And appreciate all your time tonight and your effort in participating in this. We'll see you in the fall, and we hope that you have a good and safe and healthy summer. Thank you very much. Good night.